Hey guys, TNT here. All right, so we are back at work on the YZ490 finally after, gosh, it's got to be almost a year now, way past what I expected. But nevertheless, we are back working on it. So today what I'm going to be doing is powder coating the triple clamps. The bottom, we're going to go with a chrome. I haven't used chrome yet, so this is going to be new for me. And then the top, we're going to be going with a gloss black, I think it is. And that should be pretty close to what the OEM colors were on the bike. Okay, so let's get at it. I sandblasted it the other day. Then I used acetone on it to get it as clean as I could. Then I put it in the oven at 350 degrees for about a half an hour and baked it to try and get all of the dirt and grime that is embedded into the metal to come out. So now we're going to put it back in the acetone again and get it as clean as we can. Now basically we're just going to tape off the top. You don't want to get any powder coat on that stem. All right, and we are ready to powder coat this. Hook up our air. Set up our regulator for between 5 and 10 pounds. There we go. Just give her a little test fire. And I don't know if you guys can see that, but there comes the powder. That's perfect. And here we go. Now what I'm going to do is, because I've got powder on the inside here, because I didn't tape this off, I'm just going to wipe that section out so that I don't have any powder in there. All right, let's see how she turns out. First time ever doing chrome. All right, well, I think it's cool enough to move over to the bench at least. So let's get it out of the oven. And it shouldn't be. I am pretty happy with the color. Let's just get this tape off of here. Man, that color is amazing. It looks so much like what it looked like before I sandblasted it. I'm so impressed with that. Looks pretty good indeed. All right, so while I'm waiting for a few parts to come in that I was unaware that I didn't have, I went to throw the steering stem on the frame, and unfortunately the bearings that I received did not come with the seals. I have no idea what happened there. I'm probably going to contact the person that I bought the bearings off of on eBay and just ask them what happened. I don't think they're going to wind up selling them to me because it was back in November of 2019 that I actually ordered the bearings. But I contacted another company and I got a bearing set coming with the proper seals to put the triple clamps back on the frame. So until then, I think what we're going to do is we're going to put the wheels together. I'm going to get the bearings in the hubs today, get started on stringing the spokes through our nice new gold rims, and then maybe even get some tires on. All right, so let's get at it. All right, so I've already gone about removing the old bearings. I used a blind bearing puller to pull the bearings out of one side, and then I flipped it over and I knocked the other ones out with a hammer. I did have to throw some heat at the bearing on this side. No heat required for that side. And the rear hub, I wound up with the same issue, where I'm pretty sure the bearings that were in here were the originals from back in 1983, so they needed a little bit of heat to get them out. Okay, so I'm going to be using a bearing seal driver kit to put my bearings in. If you don't have something like that, you can simply use something like this, which is a socket and an extension. I would suggest not using just the socket and placing it on top of your bearing like so, and then just hammering on it, because if you miss this or it rocks off and you hit your hub with your hammer, you can risk breaking it. Use a sacrificial extension. This one's been hammered on many times. They're not that expensive. You can go buy a real cheap one and use it, and then that way you can hold on to it like such and hit on the end of here, and you've got a good steady hold on it so that your hammer doesn't slide off or your socket doesn't slide off and damage your hub or anything else you might be putting a bearing into. So that's a way to get around not having one of these seal driver kits. All right, so what I like to do is take a cheap little dollar store brush like this, just get a little bit of grease on the brush. You don't need a lot. It's a very small amount. Like I said, this part here is actually not necessary at all. And just put a little bit of grease on the inside where the outer race of the bearing is going to get hammered into. Now what this somewhat does is keep what debris might go in there, which is not going to be much because the tolerance between the outside race and the inside of this hub is pretty much nothing. But it also helps when you're hammering this bearing in for it to go in a little bit easier. All right, get it started there. Just get down and make sure that it's all nice and level. Now I'm going to pick my bearing driver that matches the outside of the bearing, the outside bearing race. Don't hammer on the inside. You've got balls and or rollers in there that are contained inside of a cage, and if you hammer on the inside race of this, you could actually damage that. You want to be hammering on the outside of this race. So that one there is going to be a little bit too big, and that one there is absolutely perfect. Okay, now this set here, these simply just slide right in. They got a couple of rubber O-rings here, and it sits on there like that. I have another set where you actually have to put a bolt on it. Get that on top like that. Hold on to it, give it a good whack. Have a look at it, make sure it's going in straight. So right away it's not quite going in straight. Just tap on the other side to get it straight. A little bit more on that one side. A little bit more on the other side, and now we're going in straight. And just hammer it all the way down. Make sure that you've got the right size for your bearing driver. You don't want to be hammering into the edge of your hub and damaging it, and this one here was the perfect size. So you probably heard that sound there, that solid hit. That's it. It's at the bottom of where that bearing sits. So now we just flip it over and do the same thing on this side. Put a little bit of grease down inside there. Now, one thing we also have to remember, which you'd be surprised at how many people forget to do this, including myself. I've actually had to remove the bearings, is there is this spacer that goes between the bearings inside. This one here has a groove here and a rise on that side. This goes to this side of the hub. Drop that in place. Get our next bearing going here. Making sure that it's sitting nice and straight. You don't want to start knocking these things in sideways. You can get a little bit of a tilt to it, but make sure there's not much. That's going in pretty straight. Now I'm down, almost down to the hub. Going to be careful here so that this doesn't shift around too much. You're going to hear it in a second. Right there, that solid sound. It's now at the bottom. So now we're at the seal. Same thing with this. We've already got a little bit of grease in there, but the bearing kind of pulled a bunch down, so just get a little bit. Put it right in there. We want to make sure we're not going to get any water or dirt inside here. And I'll show you what happens here in a second when you get water and dirt. This front hub, when I inspected it, no water and dirt had ever been inside this hub at all. Okay, we got our seal. We're going to use the same bearing driver if I can't push this in by hand, but normally you can just push it right in by hand. You can see that I was able to just push it right down inside there. All right. And that is it. What we got to do now is we just need to make sure that that inside spacer moves freely in there. And it does. You can easily move it around so that I can get the axle in later. Got our seal in. Now I'm going to show you something. Okay, so this is the spacer for the center of the back. And have a look at the pitting that happened on that. I probably should have showed you guys what it looked like before, but it was just completely covered in rust. And you can see that when it sits in there, maybe you can see inside of it a bit. It's pretty bad. Okay, so the rear rim is the same as the front rim in how the spokes go in. You've got your brake side and your sprocket side. You're going to want to have all of your spokes in on the sprocket side first, and they will all be the same length. And then your brake side, you will have the same thing as the front one had, where you will have a bend that is straight. So here I'm just gonna find a couple. That's gonna be the brake side, and these will be, or pardon me, that'll be the sprocket side, the longer ones, and the brake side will be the short ones. So here again, you look at the head of these two. You've got one that's straight, and you've got one that, and a little bit longer, and then the one that's angled. The straight one feeds in from the inside part of the hub and then overlaps on the outside like this. These will come up, and then they will overlap and go like that. And then these ones feed down through it. So let's sort out all these spokes, get the short ones put off to one side and the longer ones put off to another side. All right, stand it up and put our our bottom fed spokes in now. All right, we got all the spokes tightened up to pretty much equal all the way around both sides. The hub's not moving around inside there anymore, so it's ready for the truing stand. All the spokes are hand tight now. No loose ones anywhere. We'll do the same thing to the front one, and yeah, then we'll get it on the truing stand. All right, guys, so while I had the camera off, I trued up my front rim. This one here takes a long time. I didn't want to bore you guys to death with truing it up. I'll do more in-depth of truing up the rim when we move on to the back one. It's far more rigid and takes a lot less adjusting. The front rim can take a long time to get it set up. This one here is still not perfect. This is a dirt bike though, so when you're out riding, you're not going to be doing 100 miles an hour on this bike, and even if you are, you're probably not going to be on the street. If you are turning your bike into a supermoto or something like that, you're probably not using your dirt rims anyway. You'll be modifying it and changing it to street rims that are far more rigid, and you're able to true them a lot easier. All right, so there we go. We got the back rim on there, and you can probably see in the camera that up and downwards movement, there's hardly anything at all. The back rim is so much more rigid than the front that in most cases when you get them mounted on here, you're not going to see anything. You're just going to see your sideways movement. So the first thing I'm going to do because of that is I'm just going to go around and I'm just going to tighten all the spokes pretty much until they're just have a bit of tension on them. Yeah, I think we're getting pretty close to having all of the spokes at about the same tension. I didn't start off anywhere in particular, but they feel pretty good. So now I'm just going to look at my up and down movement, see what I've done there. So I definitely have a slight bit of up and down movement, but not a lot. We dip quite a bit in this area right here. So now I'm just going to start to tighten this area up a little bit. I'm not going to worry about my side to side, but I am going to tighten the spokes up to somewhat equivalent. Okay, let's see what that did for me. Well, that was a big improvement already for the up and down. All right, having a look at the sideways movement here, I've got pretty good. And then right in here, she starts to pull over to that side. So we will tighten this side up, and we'll just slowly start to back these ones off a bit. Let's have a look at that. Well, that definitely was an improvement. So let's have another look here. Probably gets a little so right here again. This is where I started to pull it over to the right earlier, and now I got to pull it back the other way. All right, guys, I think that's going to be about it. I got it pretty darn close. It's a little tiny bit off up and down, but nothing that you're going to notice on a dirt bike, so we're going to call it finished there. All right, guys, so I got the frame back from work. What I wound up doing is taking it in and having a washer welded to the outer race in the bottom of the stem, and then we were able to just hit it with a punch and knock that bottom race out. So I've already installed the top race. I don't have an actual press for doing this. What I have is this tool right here, and the way that it works is you have a lock right here, and then you have this adjuster, and it just opens and closes to whatever size bearing race that you've got. And then once you've got it to there, you turn this, and that locks that into position as far open, how far open it is, and then you are simply able to just hit it with the hammer and drive your race into place. So we're going to take this off of the stand here, turn it upside down on the floor, and knock that bottom race in. Then we're ready to assemble the triple clamps. All right, well, this part is pretty simple. I'm just going to get that mounted right about there. Have a look all the way around and make sure that it looks like it's sitting in the right spot. It's a little bit off. Sitting down over here a little bit more than I have it on the other side. Just get that back out of there again. And try and make sure that it's going in nice and straight. That's pretty straight right there. Back off my lock nut. Put that in. Tighten it up. Lock it. Now it's going to be kind of tough to, I'm just going to try not holding it with my hand. Just give it a tap. You see that fell out, but you can get the idea of how this goes in and sits up against it. And I'll knock the rest of this in with the camera up on the tripod. Okay, so I don't know if you could hear that sound, but that deadening sound, that was the end. We were at the point of where it had bottomed out, and the race is all the way in. Do the same thing to the top. Now, I have a special wrench for tightening that on, but you can simply use a screwdriver if you don't have a special wrench or a punch. Just be careful that you're not smashing it all up, but I actually have this special wrench that I'm able to use. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tighten it up a little bit and make sure that my bearings were all the way in where they needed to be. So now it's obviously way too tight. Just give it a couple of turns and tighten it up again. That feels pretty solid now when I tighten that up. And now you just back it off a little bit so that it turns freely. With just a slight bit of resistance. Almost there. Still a little bit of resistance. Now there I can actually see the nut staying in position and the stem turning, so that's a little bit too loose. Just tighten that up. And right there feels pretty good. Now we're not going to tighten this nut right up because we don't have the alignment yet for our forks, but we will get it on there tight enough that it's not moving around independently from the lower one. And there we go. We're done. All right, so I've had to order pretty much all the bolts for this bike. The bolts that were originally on it just weren't in good enough shape to be able to replate them, and I'm still having issues with plating anyway, so I figured it would just be better off to order them all in. When they all come in, they are all Yamaha OEM bolts, so that's great. Still going to have to look at replating some of the suspension bolts. Probably going to have to buy a plating kit. I'll be looking into that over the next few months. Alright guys, that's going to wrap up this video. Next video we will be installing the top and lower bearings on the rear shock, putting the spring back on. I won't be rebuilding that shock as I had somebody else rebuild it, a company called RMR. He has the knowledge and the special tools required to rebuild that shock, which I did not. Then we'll be moving on to removing the bearings from this swing arm, installing new bearings, removing the decals, putting new decals on. Hopefully by then I have some new bolts for the frame and some of the other parts, and we'll be able to install them on the frame. After that, I'm really hoping I will get my shop in order to be able to paint the motor and start working on getting that motor back together. So until next time, catch y'all next video.